Rita Wezenbeek. Welcome to Digital Markets Research Hub. Thank you very much for your availability. I'm grateful for the opportunity to ask you a few questions about the DMA. And the starting one, the most obvious one, is to ask you, sitting in the pilot cabin, to provide to us the update on the latest development. We record this conversation in September. So what was the latest development in this area?
Well, so it has been an enormously busy half year, as it has been an enormously busy year in the past. So, I think one important thing is not to count what happened in just how many proceedings did we open. So the half year has been very impactful in the sense that it started with March, when the gatekeepers had to hand in their compliance program, their compliance report, and they have presented that also to stakeholders. So this was already bringing about enormous change in society, because they have made all kinds of changes in their systems, like requiring consent by users for cross-use and combined use of data, like creating APIs to allow interoperability, to allow data transfers, etc. So already enormous change that they were able to explain, and that is now available in public reports, allowing third parties to build on this change. Now, we already knew from our intensive exchanges with the gatekeepers that we would not be entirely happy with what they proposed. So there's always elements where, in a way, at that moment already, you know that you agree to disagree. So that meant that we have opened a series of non-compliance proceedings. And they were, for instance, with respect to Google, concerning the requirement to abstain from self-preferencing. These were proceedings with respect to Apple and Google, with respect to the web browser choice and the possibility to abolish apps. They were also, with respect to Apple and Google, the steering rules with respect to the possibility to create services based on the App Store. And they were also with respect to Meta, concerning the infamous system to require either consent or pay. So where Meta basically said, either as a user you give consent for me using your data across platforms, or if you don't give consent, then you have to subscribe to a subscription where you pay a certain amount per month. So on all these issues, we decided that we were not convinced by the compliance proposals, and we have opened cases. And so in the last half year, these cases also moved, because we were already able in July to adopt what you call preliminary findings, where we established, what were our concerns with respect to, in particular, the Apple no steering rules, and with respect to the Meta consent or pay model. So we were able to lay out what are our concerns, and also what do we think they should put in place. So these cases are moving in the year time that we have essentially to adopt a decision where we would establish that they are non-compliant. So in that sense, it has been a very busy year. And we also see that on the basis of what we have done, the platforms have already also introduced changes. So recently, Apple introduced changes with respect to these App Store steering rules. And also others have, like Microsoft, introduced changes to its Windows system. So, already in this ongoing dialogue, we see that the platforms have implemented changes. Now, this is a very busy machinery that is running in Brussels here. And we are moving on. So we are continuing on those cases, and we may consider also opening new cases. And we've, of course, also further designated platforms. So you may have seen that we have also designated iPad OS as a new service. We've also designated Booking.com as a new core platform service. And in the assessment of which platform should be designated, we have accepted also rebuttals, which led to the conclusion that we should not designate certain services. And for one platform with respect to X, this assessment is still ongoing. So, I mean, this is a bit what has kept us busy over the past half year.
And if I can ask you, we have these discussions about the catalog of obligations and the shortage relative, or it's always, you can optimize with members of staff, how many people are enrolled. And metaphorically speaking, if you have twice as many people, would you open twice as many investigations? Are you touching only the surface of the problem, or you feel your gut feeling is that you have covered the most important cases of potential non-compliance already within the first batch, so to say?
Well, I do think that, with tackling the app stores, for instance, so I think I forgot to mention that we also opened a case against Apple with respect to its business model in app stores, which concerns both the, let's say, the qualitative criteria, but also the quantitative criteria. So the fees that are being paid and the selection criteria. So, I mean, this means we have a series of cases with respect to app stores. I mean, app stores, the opening of an ecosystem is a very core theme of the DMA. So this we gave priority, and we will certainly also continue to do so. Now, interoperability is another important area, also opening up this ecosystem. This we will also certainly continue to give priority. And also this element of data use will continue to be important. Self-preferencing is an important area. Yes, and if you tell me you will give me 100 people more tomorrow, then I certainly have a wish list of certain things that we would also want to investigate deeper. But there's also the element of the regulatory dialogue that we have with the gatekeepers. And so not everything translates into adversarial proceedings. And it's really very important also that we continue in the dialogue with the gatekeepers. So I would definitely also want these people to work on those elements.
And how would you explain the key elements of this regulatory dialogue? Because we have, again, to caricature or to polarize the picture, the majority are very supportive, understanding that this participative approach is in the very essence of the DMA, that it's not about investigations, like converting investigation into machine gun, so to say, but it's more about continuous daily routine refinement of micro elements of different business models, etc. So it's more regulatory approach. And others tried saying that, well, if they delegate best of their best, they would outperform. B, they are too amicable, too charming, too friendly, and this they use all this kind of in soft capture way. Where are we in between these two extremes?
Well, you have a number of elements which make, I mean, many elements actually, which make this legislation very novel. And one element is that we are in a way applying lessons learned from competition policy, but in a regulatory context. So you can in a way compare what we're doing with what the ECB is doing with system banks. So that means that we have created a longer term regulatory relationship, which allows, sitting down with the platforms and discussing, is this now going well or not? So this is different than what you would do in competition policy. Another element that is different is that you're talking with 7 gatekeepers. So, I mean, we can compare what they are doing, what they are proposing. It's not a case that all 7 gatekeepers will always apply all the same provisions, but in different areas of activity, you have 2 or 3 or 4 who are in the same position. So we can compare. Also, the gatekeepers can compare. They can ensure that they are treated in the same way. So and in this context, I think what is a very important principle for us is that we're talking about effective implementation, so effective compliance. This is what the DMA says in clear terms. So in that sense, it's good to have the dialogue with the gatekeepers on what is exactly effective. And there you can have differences of opinion. So you can, there will be some who say, who do the total minimum and will say this is effective. And others will really, have a serious conversation on what they are trying to achieve, mean, what they're doing. I mean, there's a lot of engineering work here involved, and so it requires explanation on what is being done. It requires also testing by the gatekeepers in their own, stakeholder environment. But it also means that we will talk to stakeholders. So we have, in parallel to all the discussions with the gatekeepers, we also have discussions with all the third parties and stakeholders who are already or are getting ready to build on the effects of the implementation of the DMA. So, I mean, this is the whole environment of a dialogue that takes place. And in a way, it's, I have, of course, done competition law in the past, but having this kind of a regatta of companies who need to, in a way, advance, at a similar pace, it's a bit unprecedented. And also to talk with so many parties at the same time and so many stakeholders who have an interest in compliance. So now I forgot the question, but I think
You answered
this is
it
a bit
already.
painting what we are doing. Yeah.
You answered this question already and also enriched it very much my understanding of things as well, because it is actually experimental learning by doing. My next question is related to this one. Having continuous communication, having this multi-log with different stakeholders and different players in this amazing game, does require some institutional solutions, I imagine. You have to inform. So basically, maybe it's even an advantage of not having too large team where it's been divided into subgroups. You are a whole, a single unit, so to say, and thus you keep this communication level, I imagine, and information updating each other on continuous basis. What is the atmosphere? What a atmosphere, and B, how do you communicate with data scientists, with narrow specialists who understand the mechanics of things, but maybe not necessarily understand, or do maybe understand the broader context, the need, what precisely you want to extract out of them? Is everything going as expected?
Well, in life, never everything goes as expected. But so, I mean, I can tell you a bit. I mean, how the big team works. So we have a team of around 80 to 90 people, and you're probably aware that or informed that this is a team of two DGs. So this is DG Comp working together with DG Connect, and I'm in the Connect part, but we have about the same number of colleagues, so 40 in DG Comp. And also this is unprecedented in the sense that it's a real overarching team that works seamlessly together. So we have joint sub-teams. If you talk about all those different cases and topics we deal with, there are smaller teams, and in effectively all cases, the teams have colleagues from DG Comp and from DG Connect. And we have a joint registry, for instance, we have joint IT. So this team really works as an overarching joint team where it would be as if we are within one DG. Now, this works in this way up to the level of my co-director, Alberto Barquega, and me. And above, there are the different hierarchies of the DGs and the different political layers, so the commissioners, who take the decisions. But the real technical, let's say the services work is done at one level. Now, the individual teams have a very mixed composition. So we have, of course, lawyers and economists, we have engineers, we have others who are very familiar with the competitiveness aspects of platforms. And that's also very necessary, because for us to understand how, for instance, mobile devices work and whether the arguments are solid, we need different people. And so until now, I think that this cooperation goes very well. In a way, my impression from where I stand is sometimes this is a well-oiled machinery where the teams work very well together, also in smaller groups. There's a constant pace of, importantly, speaking with the gatekeepers. So we have a very intense and frequent meetings with the representatives of the gatekeepers, and also of translating what comes out of that to the decision-making process. So, and I must say, I mean, this is a nice opportunity also to say that this is very much thanks to the mixed team of managers that we have. So we think that they all work also excellently, seamlessly together, and there's you can believe me or not, but there's a very good atmosphere in the team. Indeed, it's very constructive. These are motivated people. And I think there's a general sense of we are treading new ground, and also of this is very relevant for European users, for citizens, for companies, and for the competitiveness of Europe as a whole to do this.
And without obviously naming anybody, do you already notice some different, I don't know, corporate style of engagement, of how different gatekeepers, maybe some are more willing, you can sense that they are more willing to comply, other do it rather pro forma or something in between, or it's too
Yeah,
early?
it's different to say. I mean, of course, you have different styles. I mean, it depends also on the people who are having the dialogue, depends on the corporate style. Sometimes it also depends on the wider environment in terms of, whether they have, let's say, disputes going on outside Europe, which may constrain them in what they can share and can do in Europe. But I mean, for us, the common denominator is that we look at the facts. So we look at what they present, we look at what they change, and in a way, the way they, whether they are of goodwill but they don't perform, or of bad will but they do perform, in the end is not so important. As a regulator, we should really look at what are the facts, what are the arguments, I mean, how do third parties react, and what is the change that we are really bringing about.
My next question then would be probably irrelevant, but I'll still ask it. In a Machiavellian style, if I, as a gatekeeper, come to this regulatory, to the room where we do the regulatory dialogue and say, there are two options on the table. One, I comply with obligation pro forma, circumventing everything which is possible. It will take you X amount of years. You will deliver probably what you expect, but I will get most out of it. Scenario A. And scenario B, I comply in verbally and in spirit of what you expect from me to comply within this, but you have to send me non-verbal message that you will get rid of me for the following X amount of months, so to say. Is it something which you would be willing to consider as a reasonable economic proposition, or it's something which would be completely arrogant, unacceptable way of making this, engaging in this regulatory dialogue?
As you say, I think I already gave the answer. It's very much a question of what is changing in reality, and how do third parties and third party stakeholders perceive this. And that's the benchmark. And we are there to deliver results, and which is translated in what you can call effective implementation. So that's what needs to take place. And of course, we listen to gatekeepers when they say, bear with us because we are implementing, and it takes time to roll this out, etc. And there, of course, we need to see what is realistic and what is just window dressing. And but in the end, it's what's being changed that counts. Yeah.
More normative issue. Again, we don't have a consensus even between the supporters of the DMA. How should we consider the DMA mission, so to say? One would, and again, two extremes. One would say that by pursuing each instance of non-compliance, you contribute incrementally to this broader goal of delivering fairness and contestability as the overarching objectives of the DMA, and you shouldn't be preoccupied with this broader agenda continuously because it obscures the clarity of your technical daily routine, and it's too vague and indeterminate. So deliver it on the case-by-case basis, like kind of bottom-up approach. And the other extreme would be, look, it's so omnipotent and so interpretable. You can change priorities. You have obligations susceptible, for the right reasons, susceptible for being further specified. So you are in a creative modality. You're not a prosecutor anymore. You are a designer of the regime, so to say. And thus you have to be led by this broader vision. I imagine the answer is somewhere in between, but can you rephrase it where it is?
I do think that indeed the answer is somewhere in between. I mean, what is clear is that, at least in my view, is that the DMA is not designed to be a constant battlefield or like a multiple battlefields that continue all the time. And so this is not what we are in it for. And I think the key element is that we want to create a competitive landscape that delivers choice and innovation for European citizens and for businesses. And in that context, I think a very important underlying principle is that I think the legislator, the European Parliament and Council have thought, we are not convinced by the idea that innovation only takes place if it's in the hand of gatekeepers. So innovation and improving services should be done in an environment of contestability where everybody has a chance to contest what is being done, and the best provider wins the favor of the consumer and the user or the business user. And this is what we want to achieve. And we can achieve that by having a reasoned dialogue and say, here we're not convinced in the way that you are implementing the rules. And we can, of course, if we're not happy, we can start a contentious procedure, which we are doing. And then we use the full toolbox. We do investigations. We have a retention order in place for a number of the gatekeepers, where we know that we may ask them to give all documents on a specific issue. And this is what they then have to do. And there's a much wider series of investigative and enforcement tools that we are not hesitating to use if necessary.
You co-manage the DMA Dream Team, but also you, at least until recently, you've been in charge for another existentially important area or set of areas related to digital markets in the broader sense, 5G, semiconductors, AI, those are household words these days. If I can ask you please to map out how these two sectors or these several sectors are related to each other. Are they in different, how are they related?
So one important element to note is that indeed until almost 2 years ago, I was dealing with those also in particular 5G investments. But now we are doing in this house not only the DMA, but also the DSA, so the Digital Services Act. So if you talk about the environment, then the DSA is a very important element of the environment of the DMA, in the sense that there are much cross-links between the two. So the same platforms often are subject to DMA and DSA. DSA is much more societal legislation, but there are many cross-links. So for instance, if you talk about self-preferencing and ranking under the DMA, this often translates into the rules of the DSA on recommender systems. And app stores can be gatekeepers under the DMA, but they can also be online marketplaces under the DSA. So what we are doing under the DSA, what my colleagues in this house, on this floor, are doing on the DSA, translates into effects under the DMA. So that's very important. This we can park, and then on AI, 5G, and what was the last thing? Chips. Yes. So I mean, 5G is quite evident to me. I mean, with Europe, and certainly also in the context of platforms, we want to go to a world where the digital environment can facilitate the digital and environmental transition, can offer us many more services in terms of drones, in terms of augmented reality, of virtual reality, all kinds of services. And think of virtual operations. I mean, we all know what is happening. Also, the arrival of AI, I mean, will provide enormous new services for Europeans. But then, indeed, we need also 5G to be available for us to all make use of that. So it will not happen without that. So what is very important is, and that is my past work, that Europe delivers on the objectives that we have set for 2030 in the Digital Decade program. And this is a program where the member states and the Commission and the Parliament work together to reach common goals with respect to, for instance, the availability of 5G, but also quantum computing, high performance computing, digital skills, etc. And it's imperative, and certainly now with a new mandate coming, that we work on things like spectrum licenses, the rollout of the mobile infrastructure, in the sense that it's not hampered by all kinds of obstacles that we see in the environment. So that's really important. Then if you talk about chips, I mean, it's equally a conditio sine qua non that we have the chips available to facilitate AI, to facilitate also quantum computing, etc. And the digital decade has a common itinerary to get there. But of course, we also have the CHIPS Act that aims at understanding what are the needs in Europe, and to make sure that Europe is resilient and self-sufficient. And in that sense, we have areas within CHIPS where we are very much in the front line, and in Europe, where we are delivering all kinds of services that are used all over the world. But at the same time, we are dependent. I mean, these are often supply chains where you have more than 30 parties involved in the production finally of one chip. So in that context, it's very important that we draw the lessons also from COVID, and that we work on the availability of these tools in Europe. And then if you talk about AI, I mean, that I can clearly also see in the platform economy. I mean, platforms are all engaging in the development of AI. It's also indispensable. It's also indispensable for Europe that we play our own role. And there we need a combination, and it's already, Europe is definitely in the front line on this, where we regulate AI, because it's not all positive. And so we have now the AI Act that is being implemented also as we speak. So we want to capture where there are real dangers for society in the availability of artificial intelligence, but we also want to facilitate investments, and where this is relatively without harm, we want to help it. And we have all kinds of other programs where we create AI factories, where we really want to help European industry to play its own role in the development of AI. And in our analysis, we can already see that, because, for instance, if we designate platforms as a gatekeeper, then we also analyze what's the role of the fact that they are making use of AI. Does that justify the expectation that in 2 years they will really become an incircumventable or insurmountable gatekeeper? Or is the AI not yet of that level that they will be incontournable? So we take it as an element that is real for the platforms right now. We, for instance, also look at, what are the users consenting to if they give consent for the use of their data. Is it only for the use with respect to profiling and advertising, or is it also for the use for the development of artificial intelligence? And if yes, are the users aware that their data are being used for that? Sorry to be long.
This is very diverse and mutually dependent constellation of different policies, and I imagine it's one thing to philosophize about these issues and the connections, but it's yet another thing to engage in daily routine policy making. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you a few more questions, but I know that you have another meeting. One which is getting more and more evident these days is the D word, the possible divestiture. Is it something which is surreal or sci-fi scenario, or it's a little bit less than sci-fi, and it's quite feasible within the realm of big tech? And if yes, then which jurisdiction would initiate it, in your view?
You mean in the wider context? I mean,
in the big tech, yeah, maybe advertising, or some sectors are more prone, supposedly.
you mean on a worldwide scale. So I mean, I think in the DMA and also in the context of the DSA, you have nuclear options. But I think in both pieces of legislation, there are quite a number of steps. This is something that we really would not immediately do, and only in extreme circumstances. And certainly in our daily reality of applying the rules, this is not something that is constantly on the table. We would only in very exceptional situations do that. But this doesn't take away that, but this is more the competition environment, that in some specific cases, and we know now one in the US, which has an equivalent in Europe, which is in the Google advertising world, such a possibility is on the table. And so indeed, but this is not what we are dealing with in the reality of applying the DMA and the DSA on a daily basis. So this is now very much in a different context and in the hands of courts.
The last two questions are recommendations. The first, a recommendation to academics, how to make their research more useful, rather, I wouldn't say visible, but useful to the contributing to the greater objective of making the DMA functioning for digital European digital agenda. And another recommendation to students who want to, I imagine you have a very long queue of those who wanted to join this mysterious team. But what would you expect them to be just the strongest in their field, or maybe combination of different features and skills, or something even to have some know-how which would differentiate them from others?
So for researchers, I think we are very happy with the research that is being carried out. And I mean, we as the Commission also highly value that work. So you may have seen that when we had the workshops where the gatekeepers presented their compliance reports, we deliberately also invited researchers to comment and also sometimes to lead the discussion. I mean, this was already at an earlier stage because they have a lot to contribute, and they can also in a way freely speak in a time when the Commission has not itself made up its mind, and lead the discussion in that way. So they are very highly valued. Also, sometimes in our enforcement work, we make use of support contracts where also researchers are asked to investigate certain things. And, so this is very important. What is, of course, also important is that the research is fully independent. I mean, we know that also the gatekeepers are supporting a lot of research, but we cannot have researchers supported by Google investigating Apple, for instance. So it's very important that we are totally convinced that this is clean research. So I like it a lot. I mean, I like, for instance, also that researchers venture into, creative and new areas. I mean, I remember at the time when we were just starting, there was a good study comparing supervision in the banking world and supervision in the platform world. And, we don't always have the time to do those things. But if somebody carefully looks at, how can we draw lessons and are there parallels possible? That's very good. So then about the students, yes, I mean, we need students to also be creative, venture into new territory. I think what is important is we see a bit in the market now the transition that classically in the DMA, the audience or the constituency that is looking at the DMA is still very much a competition policy constituency. And I would like it if students take this one, mile further and really look at it for what it is, also the regulatory context, and ask themselves, what are the questions that you can solve? I mean, how can we apply this legislation in a sensible way? Also drawing lessons from other areas like energy supervision or what you may have. And now I'm forgetting what, yes, one other thing that I also find very important, and that's maybe also because of the place where I am standing. So in this house, we do DMA and DSA. And it's a remarkable thing that often, people of this directorate are asked to speak either for a DMA audience or for DSA audience. And they also find that these are completely different crowds. So it's, and they don't know of each other. And I actually also think that sometimes within the big gatekeeper or VLOP companies, these divisions don't speak with each other. But there are many areas where the two legislations link. And, with all the transparency that is created, both under the DMA, but also under the DSA. So we have databases. We have, the transparency that the gatekeepers themselves need to apply. There is so much material to study that I would love it if students connect the dots and look at that.
That's really fascinating. Rita Wezenbeek, thank you very much indeed for your open, illuminating thoughts and for this conversation.
With great pleasure. Thank you very much.